In 1876, nearly 100 years after the United States declared independence, most Native Americans had already been forcibly relocated to government-designated reservations. Among the fierce Lakota people living in the north-central plains, the larger Red Cloud tribe had also signed treaties with the government and entered the reservations. However, more tribes like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse firmly resisted, defending their ancestral lands and traditional way of life. At this time, the United States was in the midst of an economic crisis, and when gold was discovered in the Black Hills, a sacred place to the Lakota white men began to turn red with greed, because the Lakota killed prospectors who trespassed into the Black Hills. The U.S. 7th Cavalry opened fire on native settlements. A young boy named Ohiesa bravely killed an enemy soldier, and when he was in danger, his uncle saved him. The attack by the government forces eventually escalated into one of the most famous battles in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The government troops did not expect the Lakota to have so many Sioux allies, and they were quickly surrounded. 258 soldiers were killed, and the Lakota claimed victory. Ohiesa earned a feather that symbolized the honor of killing an enemy. Just as he was basking in the glory of victory, his long-absent father returned. Years ago, during a war, his father's life had been saved by President Lincoln. Since then, he had become a follower of Lincoln and a devout Christian. He believed that the ancient way of life of the Native Americans needed to change, and this time, he had come to take his son Ohiesa away. In the president's office, Senator Dawes opposed President Grant and General Sherman, refusing to label the Battle of the Little Bighorn as a Lakota rebellion. He said, "We clearly stated in the Treaty of 1868 that the Black Hills belonged to them. They were acting in self-defense. We cannot break the treaty just because of gold." Senator Dawes offered a newly redrawn and larger Pine Ridge Reservation, along with more abundant supplies, using both persuasion and pressure to get Red Cloud to agree to renegotiate. Red Cloud once again picked up the pen and agreed to continue the negotiations, but he solemnly declared, "I agree only for the sake of peace, but that does not mean the Black Hills belong to you." The government army led by General Miles marched into Sitting Bull's territory. The great Lakota chief Sitting Bull, who fiercely defended his land, began tense negotiations with Miles under the threat of violence, negotiations that boiled down to "if we don't agree, we fight." The negotiations eventually broke down, and the two sides went to war. This became the final battle in a series of conflicts following the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the Battle of Cedar Creek. The Lakota, after all, had limited firearms, relying only on their belief in being spiritually invulnerable. They were no match for the well-equipped and fully prepared government army. The U.S. forces burned Sitting Bull's camp to the ground in one decisive strike. Left with no other choice, Sitting Bull led his people in a desperate escape toward Canada. Afterward, the U.S. government stopped distributing food to the resisting Native Americans and drove away the buffalo on a large scale, making it impossible for them to hunt. Eventually, tribes like Crazy Horse were forced to surrender to the U.S. Army. After Sitting Bull and his people crossed the border, Canadian mounted police soon arrived. The chief of police warned Sitting Bull, "The Canadian government welcomes you, but you must hunt only within designated areas. You are not allowed to use our land as a base to attack the U.S. military, nor may you attack other tribes within Canada." At this point, Sitting Bull had no choice but to agree. Back to Ohiesa, who was taken away by his father, he had no choice either. With tears in his eyes, his symbolic braid was cut off, and he was sent by his father to a school run by white people, but he still longed for the free life of galloping on horseback through vast lands. After some time, because Ohiesa performed outstandingly in school, the school decided to send him to a farther city for high school and college. Ohiesa didn't want to transfer, so his father took off his own cross and put it on his son. He tried to persuade him, saying, "You must understand, outside of white culture, there is no future. The Native Americans have reached a point where change is necessary." So, after leaving his tribe, Ohiesa also left his father. His father began singing Christian hymns in English to send him off. But as he sang, the tune slowly turned into a traditional Lakota song. Inside the carriage, Ohiesa wore the cross on his chest and held the feather that symbolized his identity and honor. Caught between two cultures, Ohiesa felt lost and unsure. For Sitting Bull's tribe, who had traveled far to a foreign land, the harsh Canadian winter became their greatest enemy. Sitting Bull, both chief and spiritual healer, managed the tribe's daily life and even treated illnesses. When the daughter of a tribe member named Chasing Crane suffered from a long illness with no cure, Chasing Crane lost faith in Sitting Bull. Without permission, he tried to leave the tribe, but he hadn't gone far before other tribe members caught up and brought him back. Sitting Bull, enraged, executed Chasing Crane's horse. Shortly after, Chasing Crane's daughter died, and once again, the sorrowful Indian death songs echoed through the tribe. At dawn the next day, Sitting Bull woke to the sound of chaotic hoofbeats. He stepped out of his tent and discovered that nearly half the tribe had followed his younger brother Bullhead and departed. They were heading back to their ancestral homeland in the United States. This also meant they were ready to compromise with the U.S. government and enter the reservation. Bull had warned his brother Sitting Bull, "If you try to stop them, they will open fire. I'm only doing this to prevent such a thing from happening." Sitting Bull no longer tried to stop them. He realized his authority had already diminished. As an even harsher winter approached, more and more of his people returned to their homeland. Even his son One Bull came with his wife to say goodbye. In 1887, 11 years after the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Ohiyesa had already adopted his Christian name, Charles Eastman. He graduated from Dartmouth College with excellent grades and was about to pursue a medical degree at Boston Medical School. Senator Dawes held a grand celebration in his honor. He saw Charles as the perfect example of Native American assimilation. During his speech, Dawes said, "It's hard to imagine his former savage way of life. How could anyone continue living like that?" Charles responded in Lakota with a native proverb, "You tell me, and I will listen. You show me, and I will understand. You lead me, and I will learn." His meaning was clear. Native Americans are not close-minded. At the celebration, Charles met his future wife Elaine, a schoolteacher who deeply cared about the fate of Native people. 3 years later, Charles became one of the first Native Americans in U.S. history to be certified as a doctor. He also became Senator Dawes' assistant. He helped the senator carefully design legislation regarding the Sioux reservations. After Dawes' long and difficult negotiations, the bill was finally passed. Dawes was extremely excited, but Charles did not show much joy. He didn't yet understand what selling his ancestors' land in exchange for favorable treatment truly meant. Would his former tribesmen agree? Senator Dawes enthusiastically arrived at the Pine Ridge Reservation where the Red Cloud tribe lived. To announce the new law from the government, he declared, "We will redivide 6 reservations, including Pine Ridge and Rosebud. Each Sioux Lakota will receive 160 acres of flat land to use as a farm. The government will provide all living supplies until your farms become self-sufficient. All lands outside the reservations will be sold to white settlers. This revenue is expected to reach $5 million, and it belongs to you." $5 million was a huge sum at the time, but Red Cloud's people were not convinced. A representative said, "First, many of us don't know how to farm. Second, once the land is sold, the money already belongs to you, but we won't see any of it." People began to walk out one by one. Red Cloud sat there for a long time, locking eyes with the angry Dawes. The atmosphere started to feel like it could turn violent at any moment. The Canadian winter was abnormally brutal, and Sitting Bull's tribe began to run out of food. When his youngest son died of typhoid, he finally cried. Sitting Bull eventually returned to his homeland and entered the historic reservation where his tribe was based. Upon seeing their great chief again, the tribe rejoiced with cheers. Sitting Bull looked strangely at his son One Bull. One Bull said, "Father, I'm a policeman." Sitting Bull handed over his rifle to James, the manager of the historical reservation. This act signified surrender, but Sitting Bull proudly set his own conditions. "Give me a fine house by the river. I want to continue being the great chief. I will not accept rations. All rations will be given to me, and I will distribute them." James firmly rejected him. "No one is special here, even if you're a chief." Sitting Bull, once a great chief admired by thousands, hesitated as he arrived at the agency station. There, everyone had to be called by name, wear a paper card, and have it punched. This overwhelming sense of humiliation made him unable to move forward. Elaine, a female teacher working there, stepped forward to help him. Elaine wrote a letter to her now boyfriend Charles. "Measles and whooping cough are spreading in the reservation, but there's a serious shortage of medicine and doctors. If this continues, it will cause unrest among the Sioux people." Charles, full of ambition, returned to his homeland as both a doctor and an ambassador of assimilation. He was assigned to the largest reservation, Pine Ridge, and the poor medical facilities there shocked him. What puzzled him even more was that his former tribespeople treated him like a white man, making him feel like a stranger. Fortunately, Elaine was there by his side. Within the historical reservation, Sitting Bull used his fame to sell portrait photos and autographs for money, but he gave all the money to the children in the tribe. He no longer seemed sad, and the respect and prestige he once had began to return. Even the son of Charles's assistant died of illness. In a letter to Senator Dawes, Charles continued to request more medical resources. At the same time, he reported a more serious problem. A man named Wovoka is spreading a prophecy among the Sioux tribes. He says the ancestors will return, and all diseases were brought by white people. He teaches an ancient dance, the ghost dance, to summon the ancestors, to lead people out of hardship and confusion. Senator Dawes once again used his negotiation skills to push a revised bill through quickly. At Pine Ridge, Dawes solemnly announced, "The government will purchase the land outside the reservation for $12 million. This is the final offer." Charles asked Dawes with deep concern, "If they don't agree, will the government use force to take their land?" Before the signing ceremony began the next day, the crowd suddenly became restless. Sitting Bull had arrived from the historical reservation to disrupt the scene. He gave a passionate speech. "Land does not nourish just one generation or two. What the government is doing is nothing but a robbery of the Lakota people." At that moment, the now blind Red Cloud stood by Sitting Bull's side. He loudly declared, "I will not touch that pen." Amid the overwhelming emotions of the tribespeople, the two great chiefs walked out of the hall. Hand in hand, Charles began to question Dawes' approach. "Sir, if you truly care about their well-being, you shouldn't shut the doors and draft a bill to force them to accept it. Just like the kindness you've shown me, if every Sioux child could receive the same, I believe the outcome would be perfect." Charles's words pointed out the real issue. Senator Dawes indeed had the Lakota's interests in mind, but he always operated from the perspective of the white government's authority, thinking, "My offer is generous, so you should and must sell what belongs to you." With Sitting Bull's support, the ghost dance became more and more widespread. The Sioux even established a large ghost dance camp at Wounded Knee. Sitting Bull was labeled a troublemaker, and the head of the historical reservation ordered his arrest. However, during the chaotic arrest, gunfire broke out between tribal members and police. Sitting Bull was shot and killed. There has always been controversy surrounding Sitting Bull's death. According to native accounts, Sitting Bull was assassinated. Suddenly, a large number of injured people flooded into and around Charles's clinic. A Sioux woman recounted what had happened after Sitting Bull was killed. Many fled to the ghost dance camp, but Sioux police, leading the 7th Cavalry Regiment, surrounded the camp and forced everyone inside to surrender their weapons. Although most people handed over their weapons, the cavalry colonel still believed some guns were hidden. A deaf-mute man named Black Wolf, holding a rifle, didn't understand the aggressive soldiers' intentions. During the argument, the gun accidentally discharged. The government troops immediately opened fire, indiscriminately shooting unarmed Sioux people. The army even used rapid-fire mountain guns to launch shells into Sioux tents that were mostly occupied by women and children. This was the infamous Wounded Knee Massacre. The incident resulted in the deaths of 300 Sioux Lakota people and 51 injured. The U.S. Army suffered 25 deaths, most of which were caused by their own crossfire. This massacre plunged Charles into deep pain. He resigned from his post and refused to be a tool of white authoritarianism. He began actively working with the YMCA, hoping to use religion to help his people escape backwardness and savagery, and gradually integrate into the unstoppable progress of human civilization. When he accidentally came across the feather that symbolized his past, Charles couldn't hold back his tears. For the rest of his life, Charles dedicated himself to fighting for the rights of the Sioux people. He wrote numerous books documenting Sioux Native American culture. His wife Elaine devoted her entire life to the education of Native people. They had 5 daughters and 1 son, and they named their son Ohiesa, a way to continue the bond between himself and his tribal roots. To this day, Sitting Bull remains a symbol of Native resistance and the fight for rights. The Dawes Act was ultimately enforced by law. How much Sioux Lakota land did the government end up selling? 90 million acres. In 1980, the United States Supreme Court ruled that, beginning in 1876, the government's seizure of the Sioux's traditional homeland, the Black Hills, violated the treaties signed with the Sioux people, but they only offered a symbolic compensation to the descendants of the Sioux. To this day, the Sioux Lakota people still believe the government stole their sacred land, the Black Hills. In 2007, the Sioux Lakota Nation even declared separation from the United States, seeking independence. The overall tone of this film is gloomy and oppressive. The visuals are stunning, and the acting is impeccable. The reason the Black Hills were so important to white people, of course, was gold, and history proved that, in the eyes of the government at that time, gold mattered more than human life. This theme makes the film feel less like a Western or a Native American story and more like a political drama. This is a piece of history, a story worth repeating over and over. The film uses a large number of archival photographs to transition scenes, almost like footnotes saying, "Every story and every character is real." I'm a film enthusiast. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.